Hi, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is Theology Therapist. I am Hannah. I want to talk about 3 steps to setting healthy boundaries with toxic family members. Okay, so before we jump into the boundary setting, I just want to first define what qualifies as toxic. And because family situations, especially around the holidays, can be tricky. Even if a family member isn't like toxic, they can just be difficult to navigate and exhausting, right? I thought about 4 areas that would qualify or define somebody as toxic. The first one is emotional manipulation. Think about whether you always feel like you're the problem after talking to this person. Tactics of emotional manipulation include gaslighting, minimizing, crying, like all of those things that tend to manipulate your emotional experience in order to soften you or in order for them to achieve whatever desired result. So emotional manipulation is going to be considered toxic. The second one is stonewalling. Stonewalling is refusing to communicate and intentionally shutting down the conversation in order to create distance or exert power and control. And you probably know, if you've experienced this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's like you're in a conversation with your loved one, and then all of a sudden, it's like there is a wall up, and you just can't get past it. So stonewalling is going to be that second qualifier of a toxic family member, because there's those 2 aspects at the very end of exerting power and control and creating distance, right? This is altering or changing the dynamic in the relationship. The third characteristic of a toxic family member is going to be narcissistic traits. So there are many different types of narcissism. There's overt, covert, antagonistic, communal, and malignant. Now, I can do, if you're interested, separate videos about the different types of narcissism, but I'm not going to go into that today. The thing to know here about narcissism and narcissistic traits in family members as it relates to holidays is, and like relating to somebody as toxic, is that they are focused on their own needs and wants at your expense. They expect a lot and they give a little, and they believe that they are better than you, and they really do need admiration. If you have someone in your life who fits that bill, they probably come to mind immediately when I'm reading through those traits with you. The 4th characteristic that would qualify as a toxic family member would be an emotionally immature parent. Emotionally immature parents are there are 4 different types, similar to narcissism: overly critical, controlling, neglectful, and dismissive. These are not mutually exclusive, so there can be overlap in these 4 different toxic types. So there can be some overlap, but they can also be separate. It's not that someone is only emotionally manipulative or only narcissistic, or someone is only an emotionally immature parent and they don't participate in stonewalling. Like, there are some overlap between these, but they can also be distinct. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so now that we are working with the same definition of what a toxic family member is, I want to get started with the steps to take over the holidays if you're going to be spending time with these family members. Before I do that, just remember that if you have a family member who you would say, like, in listening through some of those types of kind of toxicity, and you're like, it's not really that, or it's like that but not so extreme, just remember the importance of this is really how it impacts you and how you relate to it. It doesn't have to be so much about them, right? Like, it's how they impact you. And if the way it impacts you is that it's manipulative, it's like hurtful, it's not supportive, it's neglectful, all of these things, then that's what's important. So 3 steps to setting boundaries with toxic family members at the holidays. The first one is to be direct. I have found this one in my work with clients, in my own life, to be extremely important. Assertive communication is key. Think about talking to a child. If you have someone in your life who's like 7, 8, 9, like those ages, it can be helpful to imagine as if you're speaking to them when you're speaking to these family members. Because when you're speaking to kids that age, you tend to be really direct and like assertive in some ways, right? Because you're the adult and they're the kid, but you tend to be really direct. And so you give clear, concise statements or answers to things. And so if a kid says, "Can we go to the toy shop?" "No, we're not going to the toy shop. We're going here," for example. So what's key here is being clear but concise. When you're interacting with someone who's emotionally manipulative or has a lot of the traits that we talked about, it is really common to over-explain, and that isn't helpful. So the less information that you can give, the better. Okay, so this takes a ton of practice, just keep that in mind. But the less information that you can give without being like weird or dodgy or cagey about it, just, "No, I can't, I'm sorry. I can come over on this day at this time." Or like for Thanksgiving, I can't stay the night, but I can stay till the end of the football game. Or I can stay till the end of dinner, and then at 7, I have to go because I have this thing. The thing can be made up. And I'm actually going to talk about that at the 3rd step. So the first one is to be direct. The second step is to take an observer stance. Now, this can be hard because, especially with family members, you have a long history. And so you guys are already engaged in a specific relational dynamic, but that makes it extremely easy to get caught up in like emotional reactivity. You're already caught up in this dynamic instead of being more separate from it. What can be really helpful is trying to pretend like you are an observer in the room instead of just being the person in the room. Now, I'm not talking about disassociating. I don't want you to go and disassociate. This is a mindfulness technique where you're taking on an observer stance, because what can happen is we can be too enmeshed. We can be too connected to something. It's like we're married to something. And that just means that we go in the cycle of this relational dynamic that is toxic. And so in order to do that, we need to get some distance. You need to get some separation. And if you're still in the room, the way to do that is by taking on an observer stance in your mind, like going into the room and almost like trying to look at it through like a camera lens. What are these people doing and saying, "Oh, that's interesting. Interesting that they say that. Oh, when they say that, I bet they expect I'm going to do or to say or react in X, Y, or Z way." Does that make sense? Do you know what I mean? Or if you don't know what I mean, comment below and let me know so that I can help clarify anything. But the observer stance is super helpful because as a practice, it can provide some of that separation that you need when you're still in the room. The third step to setting healthy boundaries is to leave. A great way to set boundaries with toxic family members is to remove yourself from them. Staying in contact or in the room with family members who are actively engaging in like putting you down or manipulating you or hurting you in some way, it's continuing to re-injure yourself. It's like you have a scab or a scratch or something and you continue reopening the wound. That's what that's like. What's constant little microaggressions. If you don't live there, give yourself a time to leave or an out. You plan a Friendsgiving afterwards, or you plan to see a close friend or a supportive friend afterwards. I really recommend that, because when you're going from that environment, it can be really helpful to have a supportive one that you're going to. It can remind you and reinforce you are loved. And if you do live there, oh my gosh, plan some time away, or plan some time with friends, or go on a walk. Just find some space for you. It can also be helpful to think about planning a self-care activity. That might be like a candlelight yin yoga, or a nice bubble bath and a book and candles. And there are lots of different ways, or the painting day, if you like painting. There are lots of different ways that you can create that space for you, or do something really nice and kind and caring for yourself that can separate you a little bit, get you some time and space and distance away from those family members. But just remember that if you are in an environment that does feel toxic, one extremely important boundary to set is leaving when it's not healthy or good for you to be there anymore. Just as a reminder, you can sign up for my sort of soon to be bi-weekly, is that twice a month newsletter. You can take the religious trauma quiz that is on my website. All of the links to that are in the description below. Happy holidays, friends.